So we're back in here. Basically, I took my car out maybe once or twice over the winter. Not really any problems. I took it for the inspection around January, February-ish, and we got a pass. Once the salt cleared on the roads, I took my car out for the first time. And by the time I got home, I noticed that at idle, my oil pressure was no longer 30s, it was 15s to 5s. Doesn't really make sense. But what happens is when I start the car initially, pressure's fine. Gets up to the 60s when it first initially jumps up. When it drops back down to about 1, it'll stay at 30. Over time, the pressure drops by an alarming amount. So my guess is that since the sensor is working initially when it's cold, that is not the problem, and that I have blown the front cover O-ring. So I'm gonna attempt to figure out what's wrong with it. I just pulled it in. I checked to make sure that I do have low oil pressure. I indeed do. I did do an oil change as well. I went with 10W40. I know you can put 20W50 in, but if my car has 5 PSI for oil pressure at idle, I think it's not so much an oil problem, but more of a mechanical problem. So, to my knowledge, if we are going to take the front cover off, you have to pull the engine out, or you can jack up from the trans where you have to pull out the engine mounts to get to the front of it. So while I'm there, if I get there, I'll also pull out the old oil pan gasket and try and reseal that as well. Oil. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. So that's all I got. We're gonna tear into it and see what I can come up with. You gotta take your air intake off. It's gonna be 2 bolts in the front, and then I believe it is 8 from the box. There's gonna be 2 back pressure on the inlet tube. Then there is a connector that you gotta take off here, as well as another 2 tubes here as well. I blocked these off to delete my emissions. For the shroud, there are clips on certain parts. I don't remember specifically which one. I think the lowers are the clips, and there's 2 bolts at the top. Then there's also going to be a bolt up here. For your clutch fan, there's 4 10 mils. You can use 2 10mm wrenches to lock them up, and then a screwdriver to hold it in place to get the last one off. You're gonna need to take your battery off, your battery tray, your belts. I'm only using 2 because my AC compressor is currently causing contact with the belt. Then you're gonna want to take your alternator off. This is the bolt, I believe it's a 12. There's gonna be a clip on the back of that, don't lose that. Your coolant hoses should be just 2 clamps. Then there's also the brackets for your power steering pump and your alternator and like that kind of shit. And that's where I've gotten so far, as well as removing stupid stuff like the bracket here, the thermostat housing. But prepare to make a mess. there's a lot of coolant that goes everywhere. As you can see, the leak is not the best. I'm then gonna not remove the AC compressor, but move to the side so I can get to the front cover. Of course, I broke the 2 bolts that hold the thermostat housing in, but I managed to get those out with a vice grips and an extractor. I'm gonna remove this next, and then the OMP, and then we should see where that takes me. So this is where we are. I got the power steering pump out. To remove that, you're gonna really wanna keep the pulley on, and you should be able to get a screwdriver through the hole. There should be 2 holes that are empty, they got nothing on it. You can either put it through this one or this one, and then that you'll use to get the main center nut off, and then 2 10mm wrenches or ratchet to get the other 3 for the front pulley off. I've got the oil draining of what I did put in it, and it's kind of looking black from here, but we really won't get to see the quality until I pull it out. So I've got the OMP off. There's 2 10mm bolts right like that. You got to be very careful with these lines if you plan on reusing this. I think I'm going to. There's also a seal in there. It's like a little O-ring, sort of. You want to make sure that you don't lose that as well. I'm struggling to get the water pump off right now, but as far as getting this done goes, we just need to pull this AC compressor this way, along with this bracket as well, and then crank position sensor, and then also the water pump, and then we should be right at the front cover right here. So we've made some progress. I've got the AC disconnected from the front cover, which would be this whole assembly underneath this, behind this. For your AC, my ear is a 86 GXL. Yours could differ. The Haynes books are really good to like make sure based off of your type of model if you're looking for a specific way to take it off. But mine has 4 bolts for the AC unit, which actually go into the bracket right here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. The crank position sensor, it's just this one tiny 10mm, which hides behind that bracket pretty easily. After you take this out, your engine apparently does need to be retimed. You're gonna wanna use some sort of paint or Sharpie and mark the edge of where the position sensor meets with the front cover. That way when it comes back to reinstalling, it's not too much of a pain in the ass. But that should slip right out with a little wiggle in the 1 10mm bolt. I'm still having trouble with the water pump. I'm not sure why. I'm putting a lot of force on it, and it only barely, maybe not even a 1/16 of an inch, but we'll get it done. That needs to come off, the oil cooler lines, but it should be just that one, and the OMP is disconnected, but it's laying there. You got to be very careful with these lines as they're a very brittle plastic, and you don't want these to crack or break. So try and get that in a comfortable spot. So I took the actual water pump itself off, which is held in by the 2 stud nuts, and then 2 bolts for these parts right there. But I found the source. These studs were rusted up. Now this one I broke free next to the OMP lines, but that one right there is still stuck. So I'm gonna keep trying to use like PB Blaster and some pry bars around the edges. Don't scratch the surface that it mates to. But I'm gonna keep trying to break that rust free on the stud and see what happens. So I'm gonna be trying to use a crowbar and another little tiny angle. It's a real struggle out here. I'm being very careful not to break the casting, and you know, I'm just like watching where my crowbar actually is. I don't know if I'd recommend doing this, but I'm at the point where I've tried math gas to even break the rust free, and of course that does nothing. But there's also no angle to break free the bolt or the stud from that spot, so it's just like a really bad positioned stud, and it's a real bitch to take out. So we're at the 18 millimeter bolt on the front cover and the rest of the, I believe, 12 millimeter bolts on the outside to hold it in. To get the 18 mil off, you need to have the clutch depressed or the transmission removed from the engine. I think it has something to do with the E-shaft imbalance or something along those lines, but without that depressed, it will cause damage to your internals. So I'm gonna use this clamp and I'm gonna see how it goes. I mean, if I shut the door pretty hard, it doesn't move. Pretty good. So now I've got to my next problem. I'm not 100% on this, but you might be able to take these 4 bolts out with the 10 millimeter. Definitely not the 19 millimeter in the center, but you might be able to get away. You might. So take that with a grain of salt. That is not advice, but I've got the front pulleys off as well as the water pump. You can see the bottom 2 studs and why I was having so many problems. They are absolutely destroyed. But my 19 mil in the center does not want to come off. Got the front cover off, finally. That center bolt, if that has never been removed, or, you know, really that's it. If it's never been removed, be prepared for an absolute bitch of a time. You can see that Loctite in there that's from the factory. It's just absolutely gummed up and it's disgusting. Now that that's off, you can check your front cover O-ring, which should sit right in there. There's even a little lip for it. Mine was super pressed in. It was actually still sitting on the front face of the plate. And here it is. Doesn't appear to have any problems. It is pretty stamped, so I don't know if that would cause a failure. I don't really know much about what would cause the failure, but you can see that it's pretty stamped, and in comparison, there's the other one. I'm hoping that this is the actual reason. If not, it could be an oil pressure sender, like the sending unit. It could be a handful of things, to be honest. From bearings inside of the engine, it could be, you know, even your oil filter is clogged up. It could be the feeding tube inside the pan. So there's a lot of things to take into consideration. I'm really praying, because typically that is a fault, that for their oil pressure being that low. So I'm really hoping that that is the actual failure itself. But looking at this, it doesn't appear that there's a gasket in there. So the pan has been resealed at some point. The pump looks pretty good, but yeah, here we are. Time to figure the rest of it out. So after I snapped all of my 1/2" to 3/8 adapters, I used the 3/8 to get all of the bolts set, so it was held up against the actual keg. For the front cover, I was told online that this gasket actually is a set tolerance so that the O-ring doesn't get pinched. So I used both. I didn't use a whole lot of sealant. I know it might look like I did. I really didn't. But I kind of used it to set it in place. When you're installing the front cover O-ring, you need some sort of like petroleum jelly, or you can use just like some RTV, which is basically what I did. You don't use a lot, and you don't want to plug up the hole. You just use it so it sits in there so you can press the plate back on. For the torque spec, I believe it's 12 to 17 foot-pounds, or like 7 to 12 Newton meters. You want to do that in a star pattern from inside to out. I'm fairly certain. I'm thinking about going from that one to the bottom, over, up, then there, then over there to finish it off. After this, it's an inverse of removing it. I'll kind of go through that and show as I add stuff on, but that's it. Also, when reinstalling, when you take out the front pulley bearing right here, there's a keyway that holds this in place, and so it goes in properly. If you pull that out, make sure that you reinstall it properly. I've seen it where engines get fucked up because that keyway is misplaced, or it's backwards, or whatever. So always check to make sure that when this goes back in as well, that the keyway is lined up properly. I think what I'm gonna do next is remove the oil pan and reseal that. You don't have to do that. It's probably recommended, because what happens is that this front cover is separated from the keg there, and then this leaves this whole section in the front for possible leaks. And you're already there. It's kind of gonna be a bitch because you gotta pop this motor mount off over here, but it's not the end of the world. My pan was starting to rust and the paint was starting to peel, so I decided to paint it. Not shabby, but I am not a painter. To get the pan out, I actually had to remove the mount itself, but here are the 217s. Then there's one that sits here. Then there should be a 14 or a 15 that sits underneath the frame itself to hold the mount in place. When you go to remove your pan, there's going to be all of the bolts that line the outside, but also there should be 2 gauges and sensors on the side. This one here, you're going to need an adjustable wrench. That's what I used. I don't know the exact size. Then there's going to be 3 10 mils for that sensor, but it's one large unit, so be very careful with it, as it's very long and it goes inwards towards the pan. So when you pull that out, be mindful of that. Here's the pickup feed that holds 2 10 mils at the top. That was not plugged, and it looks in really good condition as well. When you install the front cover and you drop the pan, check to see if the O-ring dropped into the pan. That would be a problem. But once you have all the bolts out and those 2 units on the side, as well as the motor mount on the end, you should be able to take the pan out and reassess. So we're using Honda Bond for the gasket, because with a gasket it's actually worse, because when the heat rises for the housings, expand and contract. But this is what we're looking at. Now to put it on. Here's my water pump. I tried to clean it the best I could, and I resprayed the front of it so it looks nicer. But now I'm gonna reseal it and then put it on the studs when I'm ready. Almost fully back together. The bracket went on. That's four studs for the bracket. There's 4 bolts with a lock nut and washer that hold the AC unit on. I still have to put the E-shaft crank pulley and the crank position sensor as well. When you go to put the E-shaft pulley back on, put this back on first, otherwise it's going to be a pain in the ass. I don't even know if it's possible, but yeah, I would put that on first. Then it's going to be the coolant hoses, one there, and then there should be one here. After that, battery tray, then air box, and clutch fan, and then fan shroud. The clutch fan should slip onto that. And then also the power steering pump with the alternator that sits up there. And then it should be done. I think I'm gonna try it with 2050 this time around, as I'm not sure if the front cover O-ring was the problem or not, but the pan is resealed. I also did the front cover O-ring, and which both were leaking fairly bad from the pan and the front cover. So I'm gonna hope that that also makes a difference now that it should be more pressurized. It also could have been the front cover leaking that caused the pressure fault. But if that doesn't work, there is a oil pressure sending unit that sits underneath the oil filter. I can put a diagram up. That could be another problem. It could have been the oil pump itself, or I could have bearing issues inside. But we're gonna give it a shot. I only got a few more components left. For retiming the position crank sensor, I'm just putting this back in, but it will save you a lot of trouble by marking that edge when going to reinstall. So when you go to put this back in, there should be a notch in the gear right there, and a little piece of, it's almost like an edge. There should be an extruded edge outside of the sensor shaft, and the gear has a little notch of like a hole. You want to line those up the best you can, and then that should be set for when you install it. Fortunately, I'm hoping that the indent from the screw being there from so long, or the bolt being there from so long, I put it back in its place because it had a mark from where the screw was left. So I'm gonna attempt that and then get a light and see how it goes. So for the front E-shaft pulley, there's actually only one way for all of them to fit in the front pulley bearing. So that's kind of a bitch. You want to line it up one by one, and then once you think you're ready, you can take a swing at it and then try again if it's not. But there should be a little pin or little piece of metal sticking out of the front cover. That is to retime your engine. So when you look at this, there should be a mark of a yellow, and that should be top dead center, I believe. But when you go to retime it, you want to set that to the yellow spot right there. And that's it. I just got to put these 2 bolts in, which I covered in paint because they're a little dirty. And when I mean dirty, I mean rusty. And put the terminals up and fill it with oil, and then we can give it a shot. I'm gonna have to retime it more than likely, but I might get lucky enough and not have to. I ended up actually removing this bracket. I'm pretty sure that just went to the air pump for emissions, as well as the bracket and just some other stupid shit that either I couldn't figure out where it goes because it wasn't important, like little clamps that hold wires in, which probably do have purpose, so take that with a grain of salt. I just didn't know where to put them, but it's not going to stop the engine from actually running. But it is quite the difference once everything is back together. It's not as open as it used to be. So I'm gonna fill it with oil now. I'm using Castrol GTX Classic. It's conventional. I hear that there's a lot of debates, and you can really go into this as far as you want, but I hear that synthetic typically isn't the best for rotary because these consume oil. But I went with 20W50 this time, so hopefully it makes the oil pressure a lot better, but as well as the job that I did. I'm gonna pour this in, but to start the car for the first time, you wanna make sure that the oil is already in all of the areas. You wanna pull your injection fuses. That way the car doesn't fire. You don't want it to fire until you build up oil pressure to some degree. I'm also gonna flush the coolant just to be safe because those coolant passages were open. I tried my best to cover them up with paper towel, but just to be safe, I'm gonna clean those out as well. These two should be your injector fuses. And again, this is just to get the oil circulated around in the engine. This is not to fire. There even could be a chance that it'll sound very off or nothing will happen because I forgot to do something. But in the off chance that everything went okay, it should crank over fine. I'll pop the injector fuses back in and then the car should start up. We had 15 PSI, by the way. So we had 60 PSI at idle, which was already happening before. So I'm just a little bit excited, but the problem could still be there. I gotta get the engine warm, and I'm sure you heard that buzzing sound, maybe not because of the exhaust. That loud buzz was a coolant signal. So I'm gonna put some coolant in, I think, maybe, but yeah, pretty cool. Use this as a chance to look for leaks as well. If there's a leak, it's probably not a good sign. So far, I think I'm not gonna jinx myself. I'm not quite sure if timing is an issue right now, but I do have a nasty chop. I think based off of a gathering of information from a lot of friends, that one of the injectors is more than likely leaking inside the rotor housing, causing flooding. So the car really doesn't like to start and also runs crazy rich by the looks of it. So think I'm gonna get those cleaned or buy new ones. They are quite rusty. To bleed your coolant lines, you're gonna wanna get one of those spill-free. You don't have to. I did. It's a really good choice. I recommend it. You want one of the spill-free links, and then that should go right up to your radiator cap. Keep an eye on this reservoir. You want that full. It doesn't matter as much, but it's better to monitor it and do that at the same time than run that and then have that dry. So I would recommend that as well. You want to turn your heat on. I believe you want it to be returning air or recycling air with the heat on all the way, as the heater core inside is actually linked to the coolant lines. So to get a full bleed and to get that light to turn off, you need to turn the heat on with, I believe, the returning air or the recycling air button. That's the only way it turned off for me. I think there's a bypass unless the heat's actually turned on for that to even work. There's obviously a lot more to be done, but as far as this video goes, it's fairly long. I think it's over 30 minutes. I want to keep it short and sweet, but very informative as possible. This isn't for you to exactly replicate what I did. This is just how I went about it, and if you're doing the same thing that I did, it was a pain in the ass. So don't get me wrong. If you don't like big jobs, which I really don't, this might not be for you. It was a bitch, and it really is annoying. You're gonna get dirty as fuck, and it really sucks, to be quite honest, but that's just what had to be done. I mean, I was put in a scenario where my PSI was tanking. I wasn't gonna be able to drive the car with low oil pressure, so it was better to just do my due diligence now and get it done than worry about it later. That's it. I mean, if you're confident and this was just a brief, very rough way of completing this, if it, kind of made you have the insight to do it, by all means. And if you can find me, I'll try and put my best information out. I want to put a big thank you to my friend Jonathan and Peter. They are the boys, and honestly, I don't know if I would have been able to do this without them. I hope I helped you. Maybe you're looking to do the job or just wanted to watch the video, but I appreciate the support, and I hope you're doing better than I was.